Roman Polanski and Peter Coe are in the studio, both directors bringing out new productions this month of Macbeth, one on film, the other in the theatre, with an all-black cast of actors, which gives, to say the least, a new dimension to the Thane of Cawdor. Roman Polanski's Macbeth, made in collaboration with Ken Tynan, largely financed by Hugh Hefner of the Playboy fame, is a major event in the long and checkered history of Shakespearean cinema. You can forget all those scandal stories you may have read in the papers suggesting that Polanski and Tynan were turning Shakespeare into a sort of Scottish O Caledonia. Violence there is in plenty, but that comes with Shakespeare's authority. Banquo is dispatched with an axe in his back. Children are cruelly killed. Blood spurts vividly. Heads are literally severed. But Polanski's interpretation is, to my mind, a brilliant visual tour de force. No director today moves the camera more sensitively, nor composes finer screen pictures. The cast is made up of relatively unfamiliar faces, led by John Finch as Macbeth, the Scottish chieftain who kills his way to a kingdom, and Francesca Annis as his scheming, tempting wife. Youthful figures both. One is tempted sometimes to think of them as star-crossed lovers, a Scottish Romeo and Juliet, at least until the blood begins to flow.
If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence and catch with his surcease success, that but this blow might be the be-all and the end-all here. But here, upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. But in these cases, we still have judgment here, that we but teach bloody instructions, which being taught, return to plague the inventor.
Thunder, lightning, bolting horses, Mr. Polanski. Is this what attracted you first to Macbeth of all Shakespeare's plays?
To be absolutely frank, I always secretly dreamed of making a Shakespearean film, not necessarily Macbeth. But my first important experience in cinema and as a viewer, as a part of audience, is connected with Shakespeare. I was tremendously influenced by first Olivia's films, and as a matter of fact, Hamlet was the film which I saw about 20 or 25 times when I was 14, and that develops my interest in Shakespeare. I started reading Shakespeare and seeing a lot of plays in Poland at that time.
Yes, that you were reading it in translation at that time, were you?
Necessarily. I didn't speak any English 7 years ago when I first came here, so obviously I had to read translations. But they were good translations. I think Shakespeare is one of these authors who's well translated into practically every language. But anyway, so for me, cinema and Shakespeare come somehow close when I look at my first experiences, you know.
And the fact that Shakespeare is also, perhaps, or some people would say, primarily language, wasn't a drawback to you. The fact that it's great poetry, great verse, very dense, that it needs to, I think.
Well, I think that thanks to Olivia's treatment, which was very severely criticized in England particularly, it worked for me, you see. I started loving it. To me, it was a kind of a tale. I was tremendously impressed by this film, and I remember reading these big books with Victorian illustrations and getting into this Tempest or King Lear and living it. And I was working in a theater, I forgot to mention, as an actor. I started as an actor when I was a young boy. And so it was quite close to my heart. But then, obviously, as I started thinking of a cinematographic career and slowly plowing in this direction, I got into this film school, and I forgot all about Shakespeare. I was somewhere behind, you know, and I was always thinking of it. I wouldn't dare to tackle this until recently, you know, and I thought the right moment came, and I was considering doing Shakespeare's play, and I thought Hamlet has been done so well, not only by Olivier, but also
By the Russian.
The Russian Hamlet, which was fabulous. Othello, I found quite boring and was done very well by Orson Welles. I thought that Macbeth was the one which didn't succeed, so I thought I would have a crack at it.
Well, let's pause for a moment. I'd like viewers to see how you've had a crack at it. If we can show viewers another scene now and see how you translated Shakespeare into cinematic terms. It's the moment when Macbeth draws back from the idea of killing the King Duncan, and his wife appears by his side to spur him on.
Have they asked for me?
Know you not he has?
We will proceed no further in this business. He hath honored me of late. And I have bought golden opinions from all sorts of people, which would be worn now in their newest gloss. Not cast aside so soon.
Was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? Hath it slept since? And wakes it now to look so green and pale at what it did so freely? From this time such I account thy love. Art thou afeard to be the same in thine own act and valor as thou art in desire?
Prithee, peace.
Wouldst live a coward in thine own esteem, letting I dare not wait upon thy wood, like the poor cat in the adage?
I dare do all that may become a man. Who dares do more is none.
What beast was then that made you break this enterprise to me? When you durst do it, then you were a man. And to be more than what you were, you would be so much more the man.
Ale, stain of quarter. If we should fail,
We fail. But screw your courage to the sticking place and we'll not fail.
A blood-chilling scene from Roman Polanski's film version of Macbeth. And before we go on talking to Mr. Polanski, let's consider for a moment the stage productions. The stage productions are inevitably less spectacular, and yet Macbeth has always stayed high in the Shakespeare canon for all its centuries since it was first performed, despite its reputation among superstitious theatre people for being an unlucky play. Today's stage directors are frequently looking for new ways of interpreting Shakespeare. Last year, there was Jack Good's rock version of Othello called Catch My Soul. Jonathan Miller, a few years ago at the National Theatre, turned The Merchant of Venice into a sort of Italian Forsyte saga, and Zeffirelli put Much Ado into 19th century comic opera costumes. Macbeth itself was made into a gangster film by Ken Hughes in England in the mid-50s, starring Paul Douglas and Ruth Roman. But so far as I know, nobody on the stage has done here in England what Peter Coe is doing for a new Macbeth production which opens next week at the handsome Civic Theatre in Swindon, The Wyvern. Peter Coe's Macbeth is a black Macbeth, and it's set in tribal Africa. Macbeth becomes Mbeth. Banquo on the left becomes Bawandi, and Macduff is Mishasha. And the witches on the blasted heath have become witch doctors, juju men. These illustrations, by the way, are the costume designs by Inga Borg. And although Shakespearean poetry is left intact, as we'll be hearing in a moment in the play, it has meant also a lot of altering of place names. Thane of Cawdor becomes Chief of Maboe. Burnham Wood is the Great Forest. Dunsinane the High Hill, and the Kingdom of Scotland is Barotseland. Well, Peter Coe, your Shakespearean background is impeccable. You've made many Shakespearean productions, including several of Macbeth, the notable one with Christopher Plummer in Stratford, Ontario. Why now this sensational change to a black Macbeth? Is it sensationalism, or is it much more than that?
No, it certainly isn't sensationalism. When I did the production with Chris Plummer, I was extremely satisfied with it. I mean, he was an excellent Macbeth. But there was one area of it which bothered me, and has always bothered me. I've been rather obsessed with the play. I mean, unlike Polanski, I really have been obsessed with the theme of this play for many reasons, which perhaps we can come to, for a long time. But the one area of it which I found in that production that dissatisfied me was the area of witchcraft. I dealt with the witches very much as Polanski did in the film, strangely enough, and it still began to bother me, and it's bothered me ever since, because there is very little reference in modern life, in Europe at least, to witchcraft. I mean, the audience, the contemporary audience watching the play don't really know where to place themselves in relation to those witches. I mean, we've read about them and we've heard about them, but
well,
we don't know them chemically. We don't know them inside our guts. Now, there is, of course, one place today, even today, where witchcraft is rife, and that is Africa. And I do believe that people, even sitting in London suburban homes, know of it and to a certain extent believe in its power. And one of the ways, of course, today, I think, of finding an actor who can play Macbeth is to find an actor who actually does believe in witchcraft. And I went out and found one, and he happened to be black because of the reasons I've given. And that's really the basic reason.
Macbeth, you're saying, is driven on by this belief in the power of sorcery and the fact
yes,
that
the whole
witches...
play is spurred by that idea. And if the idea is left out, or if it's not well placed in the mind of the audience and the mind of the character, then the play doesn't work. That's my contention. There are other reasons for doing it in this way. Shakespeare, after all, was after a tribal community. I think perhaps 11th or 12th century Scotland was the nearest thing he knew to it. The nearest thing we know to it, again, is something like the African tribal community. I mean, the clan system, the Scottish clan system in the 11th century is very like the African tribal system today.
Well, it sounds very convincing a theory, and we can pause for a moment now to show viewers how the Black Macbeth works out in practice. Oscar James plays Macbeth, and Mona Hammond is Lady Macbeth, and they recorded for us part of the scene which we saw from the film version just a few moments ago.
Oh, no. What news?
He is almost supped. Why have you left the chamber?
Have he asked for me?
Know you not he has?
We will proceed no further in this business. He hath honored me of late.
Was the hope drunk wherein you dressed yourself? Hath it slept since? And wakes it now to look so green and pale at what it did so freely? From this time, such I account thy love. Art thou afeard to be the same in thine own act and valor as thou art in desire? Wouldst thou have that which thou esteemest the ornament of life, and live a card in thine own estate?
Peace! I dare do all that may become a man. Who dares do more is none.
What beast was then that made you break this enterprise to me? When you durst do it, then you're a man. And to be more than what you were, you could be so much more the man. I've given suck, and know how tender it is to love the babe that milks me. Would, while it was smiling in my face, have plucked my nipple from his boneless gums and dashed the brains out. Had I so sworn, as you have done to this.
If we should fail.
Fail. But screw your courage to the sticking place and will not fail.
The Black Macbeth with Oscar James and Mona Hammond. And Roman Polanski, what did you make of that straight away? the idea behind. I mean, I'm not asking for criticism of
Well,
the
I
performance.
understand his motivation, and as far as the witches are concerned, and prophecies. However, I must tell you, there is, you know what astroflash is? Well, astroflash is a computer which has been fitted with by astrologists, and you pay, I think, £3 or £5, and you receive this enormous chart. If you give the proper date and hour of your birth. I mean, that proves that the belief in what's the equivalent of witchcraft still exists. There are serious businessmen who make no move without consulting these astrologers or astrologists.
Astrologers, that's right.
You see, when you tell somebody, I mean, practically most of women, you know, women have even more belief in it, and many men, if you even sometimes by accident, jokingly, a gypsy comes and says something, there is something underneath, some kind of shade of belief in it. I think this is enough to spur an action in somebody, not to go somewhere, not to undertake a voyage or do.
I think the main point here is we're both struggling to find something that will mean something to a contemporary audience. And
you really feel it's necessary? It's not enough to take Shakespeare's text and put it in the 11th century as
well,
Mr.
in the
Polanski
11th
has.
century it can mean something to a contemporary audience. But what I mean is that it's no good treating it as a museum piece and then asking people to sit there with textbooks' minds and work it all out for themselves. I mean, one has got to do something that has reference to their lives today. I think you have to take it further than witchcraft, by the way. I mean, I think the relationship between the man and the woman in the play is a very definite relationship and has very specific contemporary references, as does indeed the idea of the criminal mind, etc. All these things have to be translated.
I heard it said that Macbeth is an immoral man in a moral society. Would you agree with that definition of Macbeth's
No,
position?
the society he is in is totally immoral.
Amoral,
I mean,
isn't it?
In fact, I rather go for the assumption that what Macbeth does is to soak up the evil that's in the world. I mean, he lives in a totally evil, corrupt society, and somebody like Christ or Macbeth, and the two people in an interesting way have very, very strange affinities, soaks up that evil, lives it out, annihilates it, and therefore forms a totally honest and sin-free relationship with the world. I believe that the significant moment of the play is, in fact, the murder. I mean, I suppose nobody would really disagree with that. But by which I mean
The murder of Duncan.
the first murder, the murder of Duncan. Because who was it who said, Camus, I think, he who is not killed is a virgin. That what Lady Macbeth leaves out of her calculations is that she doesn't actually plunge the knife into a human being. That by doing so, a man is given the chance to possess the decision between death and life. He becomes somewhat divine. It's a very difficult experience for any of us to contemplate. But I think Shakespeare is suggesting that to a certain type of human being, if he takes somebody else's life, he passes through an experience which very, very few men ever have. And it must in some way alter him, either for good or for bad. It's this, what Macbeth talks about is, please release me from this great bond which keeps me pale. And the great bond is the step between not killing and killing. Mm-hmm. I know we all feel that killing is immoral and bad and wicked and all the rest of it, but at the same time, there is a desire in a lot of people to overstep that boundary, to go into an area just to find out what it's like. And a lot of the cult killings of today, for instance, by young people, for instance, are exactly to experience something that they believe they're being denied. Now, all I'm saying is not that that is a good thing or should be encouraged, but that it is a thing that Shakespeare tried to investigate. What happens to the mind? What happens to the personality once the step has been taken?
But you're suggesting that it wasn't that, but that it was sheer ambition and, as it were, material greed. They want power. They want the riches that go with
I
throne.
think that being the #1 warrior of Duncan, Macbeth has been acquainted with killing as an act.
They've probably all been killing all their lives, haven't they? I mean, he killed as a matter of course in the 11th century.
The play starts with description of how bloody and fearless Macbeth was in the battle, and that's why the king has such sympathetic feelings towards him, I think. But I don't disagree with Peter either, because I think that the good thing about Shakespeare, particularly because it's 250 years old or older, it's that you can use it like a theme in jazz, you know, like Green Dolphin Street, which has been played by so many musicians in so many different ways. And important thing is that, you know, to treat it the way that people find it interesting, and not only as you said, a theme for school study. Particularly in the film, you have this dilemma of doing a boring piece or doing something which would be maybe criticized by Orthodox people, but it would be by Orthodox critics, let's say, but it would be entertaining for audience, for average audience. To me, film, it's first of all a visual medium, and the visual side of it is tremendously important for me, and that's what I was trying to do. Secondly, I was trying to render this archaic language digestible for today's audience, and say that everybody with an average intelligence can understand this language. It's false. I went around it by trying to turn a lot of text into visual, like you just said, this thunders, etc., or by having a parallel visual action behind the dialogue that by association explains what they are talking about. Secondly, but making them speak sort of matter-of-factly, you see, because I noticed that since I have a lot of experience in languages, being often in the country of which language I don't understand, like when I went to America for the first time, I didn't speak any English, or very little. I just started it. And there was, for Knife in the Water, I had the distributor who bought the film, who had a big fat cigar and spoke with thick American accent. And I had this lady who was taking care of publicity who spoke to me like that, trying to pronounce well every word. I couldn't understand what she was talking about. I was hung up on separate words. And this man would just say, all right, well, let's have a drink now. And I knew by intentions what he wanted to do.
That's fine when you're talking with distributors in Hollywood, but when you've got an important soliloquy or an important duet passage between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, are you really able to follow? I must confess, the first time I saw the film, I wasn't. All the intricate dialogue, for example, in the scene we did see, which you split up, people offer drinks to Macbeth in the middle of it, there's dancing going on.
Yes,
it's not
precisely.
just a two-hander like the
This is not people, actually, that's Malcolm who offers a drink, and that makes him change the, he's hesitating until that moment. From that moment he comes to her and asks her, what if we fail?
Yes, I take the point. So I take that point, but on
at
the same time, there is this danger that you lose the text in favor of the picture. You'd say that doesn't matter, you can read the text, you can see it in the theater.
Strangely enough, also, sometimes when you illustrate, I mean, I'm not referring it particularly to this picture, but when you illustrate things that were meant to be just said and not illustrated, we must remember who wrote it. He wasn't a screenplay writer, although he wrote in an area that makes adaptation to the screen very, very feasible.
Must be one of the huge problems for anybody tackling Shakespeare today in the mass media, cinema, television, even the theatre. Shakespeare, for most people, means boredom.
Yes, well, I have the same problem, you see, except that in my case it will be boredom in Technicolor. To many people, Shakespeare being a gigantic yawn, it would be a Technicolor yawn. Here we're getting indecent.
But you at least, you go to some way around by cutting a lot of the text.
Well, that doesn't help much, you know, because whatever is left is quite a lot. Well, we left all soliloquies almost untouched. I find this just very comfortable.
All right, sit back. But, for example, in that great scene between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, you cut one of the great lines, "I've given suck, and know what it is to be a mother."
I cut it for a different reason, not that I wanted to make it shorter, and this line, it's easily understandable, so there wasn't a reason either. It's simply because I took liberty of changing her character in the play, and she is not the nagging bitch that's usually represented in Macbeth. And she rather tries to use persuasion and a bit of her charm to make him act this way. I think that very few men, especially men with integrity, strong warriors, would be influenced by a nagging wife, but they can be influenced by a wife whose opinion they value and whose charm means something to them, etc.
You'll forgive me if I criticize, but it seemed to me that the one thing you didn't get across in the film was a very close sort of conspiracy relationship between Macbeth and Lady Macbeth. They're young people. In your production, one sees the black couple very close together very often. In the film, they're hardly ever together. There's one scene on a bed which suggests a kind of sexual excitement between them, but it lasts just for a frisson, it's gone again.
Well, I'm surprised, actually, at what Roman says about the relationship, because although I agree with him, one doesn't want a nagging woman, because no man, as he says, would pay much attention to her. But at the same time, I think that a lot of great statesmen and great men have, in fact, been very much put in their places and bolstered by the woman behind them. And I think that's what Shakespeare's intention here was to... I put it more extreme, actually, in my production. I start with Macbeth as rather a bit of a nervous wreck, as a man who really is not quite sure of himself. You see, it's one thing to be able to fight, like Eisenhower did very well during the war, another thing to be able to run a country. The two things are separate. It doesn't mean to say just because a man is very good at ice skating that he can, in fact, manage a giant business. And we must separate the two functions.
Sometimes it happens, however.
Sometimes it does, but you must separate the two functions, I think, in saying that just because he's a warrior, that means he's capable in other things. It doesn't necessarily...
Yeah, but making it short, I think, you see, for Shakespeare it was much easier, you know. His public reacted more like I probably did when I saw my first Punch and Judy, you know, when I was 6. I mean, I really believed that in danger of these little figures, you know. It was a Polish equivalent of Punch and Judy. But anyway, I was saying, don't go around this corner. There's that man waiting for you. I was really afraid of it, you know.
I felt like that in your film.
Well, thank God, because to keep these people in the pit of the globe standing for a couple of hours, in certain cases probably 3 hours, you really had to be interesting. And if you read other plays of this period, you realize that public really had a lot to say and was often criticized because the dialogue between an actor and somebody in the audience, it's not it's not a modern invention, you know. In Elizabethan plays, you find very often somebody coming from the audience upstage and
It's a very
telling
interesting
how
thing,
to...
this, because, you know, one of the reasons why they were so enthralled at the Globe is that they didn't know what they were going to see. They were people who had never seen these plays before. I've done most of all my work, in fact, in Shakespeare abroad. This is my first production in this country. I did a production in India of Twelfth Night to people who'd never really seen the play before. And there you attract an audience who don't go along with a history, an ancestry of Shakespeare is boring. And one of the things that occurred to me is what a pity it was, in a way, that you weren't able to change the title of the film. You know that Kurosawa changed his Macbeth to Throne of Blood. I think that would attract a cinema audience, and I'm rather glad that we're calling ours the Black Macbeth, because suddenly it throws it off the idea that it's by Shakespeare and, my God, that's not for us.
Let me just ask you to wind up what you would think, if you had to capsule it, Macbeth is about. Two definitions. Central core.
I think it's basically about the act of murder. I think it's a study in what we call the criminal mind, but more than that, in that murder is associated more than anything else as one of the most monstrous evils. And I must separate it from this idea that you can go out and kill people in battle, because it is quite different.
Killing Duncan in cold blood is something else.
This is quite a different concept. And also you're killing a king who is near to God, etc., etc. It is a study of a criminal act and the effect on it, the effect of that act on the people who perpetrate it.
I haven't got a clue.
Well, what do you think about the film? What do you think about the text is there in the film?
The film, I like it.
Yes. Gentlemen, thank you both very much.